Hello. Glad you could be with us today. I'm Dr. Steve George, Landscape Horticulture Specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today we will share with you some of the key scientific discoveries that support our earth-kind soil management approach. I love working on earth-kind soils. Many years ago, we set out to find a technique whereby homeowners could overcome many of the plant problems that are inherent in heavy, sticky clay soils. And boy, those are a big challenge. So we conducted a 2-year research study on the suitability of expanded shale as an amendment for heavy clay soils. Specifically, the native soil in our test was an Austin silty clay. We then conducted a 6-year landscape demonstration with various rose cultivars in which both expanded shale and compost were added to the soil. We'll tell you about that a little later. This research study was published in Hort Technology, which is a highly respected peer-reviewed scientific journal. That's the highest level of scientific rigor. Peer-reviewed articles are. I want to thank Dr. John Sloan for leading this research and Drs. McKay, Coball, and Feigley for serving as collaborators in this effort. The experimental design for this research was randomized complete block, which is the strongest approach for work of this type, and we had 6 blocks. That really makes it strong. We had 6 experimental treatments, 2 sizes, 2 diameters of expanded shale, plus sphagnum peat moss, cottonseed hulls, quartz sand, plus unamended soil as the control. To have a control treatment is crucial in any properly conducted research study. Pansies were the cool season crop that we utilized, and scaevola was the warm season test crop. During the first growing season of the study, which was characterized by heavy rainfall, the pansy root rates were significantly greater in the expanded shale treatments. The large diameter shale, which is about 1/4 of an inch in diameter, significantly increased the survival rate of transplanted scaevola plants. And also it increased the quality of foliage and the percent blossom coverage during both growing seasons. And incorporating large diameter shale is in essence a permanent modification to the physical properties of the soil. And that permanence is going to provide a great benefit to you over the years. Interestingly, quartz sand was the only treatment that increased the bulk density of the clay soil. And over time, the soil in this particular treatment became quite compacted and difficult to work. Now, Penn State University reports that when you have an increase in bulk density, the porosity of the soil decreases. That's not good. Air-filled porosity is very important to proper root growth and function. So this is why we recommend that you never add sand to a heavy clay. Sand and clay make concrete. All right, our overall conclusions from the research study is a large diameter shale consistently improved overall plant performance more than did the other amendments in the study. The landscape demonstration, even in a sticky heavy clay with no fertilizer application, the roses responded very well to a pre-plant incorporation of expanded shale and compost combination, and with a year-round mulch of shredded hardwood. Immediately after the bed preparation was complete, the tilth and workability of the heavy clay was markedly improved, even that quickly. And even 6 years later, during which no tilling had been done, the soil was still friable and very easy to work. So it works in the real world. Practical benefits: incorporating large diameter shale is, to my knowledge, the fastest and most permanent way to open up and aerate a sticky, heavy clay soil. Incorporating this material makes the soil more friable and easier to work. And when combined with fully finished plant-derived compost, we have seen outstanding plant performance. And it makes, I didn't ever think I'd say that, it makes it fun to garden and landscape in these heavy clay soils. So even though I dearly love fully finished plant-derived compost, if I were limited to only one application of only one soil amendment with which to open up heavy clays, I would take large diameter expanded shale and never look back. It is that good. But please remember, expanded shale is only needed in sticky, heavy clay soils. Now you're going to get to meet 2 of my great friends and earth-kind teammates, Dr. Daryl Harp and Mr. Todd Williams. We are on the beautiful campus of Texas A&M University Commerce. We're here with Dr. Daryl Harp, who's a professor of horticulture in the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources at A&M Commerce. Dr. Harp is a great friend and EarthKind teammate. He's one of the most intelligent, finest gentlemen I've ever met. He's a great teacher, excellent researcher, and one of the most knowledgeable and practical ornamental horticulturists I've ever known. He is the best of the best. He's the leader of our EarthKind environmental soil research team for many years, and just recently this work was very favorably reported on in an article in the New York Times, so we're very pleased at that. He has led the EarthKind Soil Management Annual Flower Research at the new Rockwall County Courthouse, as well as other important EarthKind studies over the years. He's worked many long days and in the heat and in the cold to make these studies a reality. Today I've asked Dr. Harp to share with you his research philosophy and details of discoveries that we have made in EarthKind environmental soil management. Dr. Harp.
Thank you, Steve, and I'm glad that you're here on the campus. We're very happy to have guests, and we're always enjoy your company and your leadership here in the EarthKind program. When I first came to A&M Commerce, one of my first teaching assignments was a soils class. I didn't know enough to do that job great at that time, but this has been one area where I have learned to love, and I developed what I believe is a very good, solid expertise in the area, and realized that this is the foundation of everything that we do in our landscapes, and every garden starts with the soil. In terms of what we do in EarthKind, we know everything starts with the management of the soil. We go out, and one of the first things we're going to do is look at our soils, and what do we need? What's lacking there? General answer most of the time is organic matter. So adding some organic matter is always important. The understanding the physical, if we have a heavy soil, then we know that sometimes adding expanded shell is going to help us improve the drainage. We know that these are aspects, and getting that soil right is important in making our gardens perform as well as possible. We also know that we want to mimic what Mother Nature is doing as best as possible. And we know that adding organic matter and making sure our organic matter is staying high is what's going to help us improve the physical characteristics of the soil. Everything from bulk density to porosity, which are going to affect drainage and water holding capacity inside the soil, to the chemical changes that occur in the soil, the increased nutrient availability, the changes in how the plant roots can actually get those roots. All of those are important aspects in making the EarthKind gardens as successful as they are. When you look at things from a research component, we always want to our goal is always to make sure that the end consumer gets the right information and the best information possible. That means we want our information to be accurate. We want our information to be detailed. We want to make sure that we're collecting the right data at the right time. And we want to make sure that it's informative. We don't have the luxury of letting people always know just what we think. We have to go out and we have to make sure that the people of the state of Texas and the landscapers that we're dealing with have accurate information. So we need data. We need to go out and spend the time in the field actually collecting the data so that we have hard numbers. And then we come back and analyze that data so that we're actually making the proper conclusions, and therefore from those we make the proper recommendations. The idea, and when I first joined the EarthKind team, when I was starting it, a lot of my interest really started from what I think is an accidental research project. When I first got here, one of the first things that we did, and will always do, is we always take the landscape management class and they will install a new landscape somewhere. And doing this, I encouraged the students, because we had no money, so we used what I call the BBS method, the beg, borrow, and steal. And this young man had worked very, very hard, and he had managed to collect some landscape fabric and get it donated from a group in Arlington. I'm not a fan of landscape fabric. I wasn't then. I'm even less of one now. We knew it was temporary, so we put this landscape fabric down. We covered it with mulch. The landscape fabric covered about half of the landscape. The other half of the landscape was just covered in mulch only. The beds were planted, and we allowed them to sit. Well, as I mentioned, that landscape fabric was temporary. So we came back about 3 years later and started removing it. As we're removing it, we started noticing a difference in soil color. What was under mulch only was much darker in color, whereas what was under the landscape fabric had retained much of its original color. We started pulling soil samples. We saw that the soil underneath the landscape fabric had half of the soil organic matter. The soil that was under mulch had 3 times as much nitrate in it, nitrogen for our plants. The soil under mulch only had 5 times more potassium. So we started realizing the importance of what mulch was doing and making sure that the decomposing mulch was able to provide everything it could to that soil and to the root systems of our plants. This is about the time that Steve approached me, and we started doing some of the EarthKind rose research that we've published over the past several years. These were big projects that involved going in and modifying what were essentially barren soils before. We went in and tilled, and in one case, we just added mulch. The other, we did add a little bit of compost, tilled that in, and then over the next 4 years, collected data on those roses. The one thing that we found is those roses took off. For example, in the study where they got compost or mulch only, by the time we were at the end of the second year, the Ladybanks roses were growing so well that we had to go in and prune them because we had only planted them on 10-foot centers and they were growing into the other roses spaces. We knew that other roses were growing very, very well, and they did in all locations. Since then, I've completed other studies involving other plants such as crepe myrtle. Steve and a great team in Collin County has done tremendous work in perennials. All of these, we saw strong plant growth in what would normally be considered suboptimal soils if you send it to a soil testing lab. Many soil testing labs, they want to recommend soil nitrate N levels as high as 30 ppm. We saw this growth in some cases in soils as low as 3 ppm nitrate N. Well below what we think, but this is the idea of what's called plant homeostasis. The plant's ability to adapt to a suboptimal nutrition as long as it's provided for a very long period of time, but at that consistent level. Even though it's low, the plant can adapt. And this time I'm going to step over and I want to show you some of this and what happens whenever, for a research project that we did in Rockwall involving annuals. And this was data that was presented at the ASHS, the American Society for Horticultural Science, Southern Regions Research Conference in Mobile, Alabama, a few years ago. Okay, so this is what we call a scientific research poster. This is something that we would present at a scientific research conference where we present, and when I say we, I mean me, my graduate students, and my undergraduate students, all of whom have been part of the research and presented for me. We'll go primarily to the American Society for Horticultural Science, either the national meeting or ones that conference in the southern region, and we're presenting with other scientists to describe our data. This is a study that we're very proud of that we did with Todd Williams, who you'll meet later in the video, and his research team and his master gardeners there in Rockwall County, a fantastic group of people to work with. where we actually looked at what happens in the soil profile over a long-term period. We've got lots of studies out there that say compost doesn't work as well as fertilizer. Well, most of those lasted one growing season. And one thing we know from EarthKind is the benefits of organic matter get enhanced year after year after year. And one of the things that we saw here, our ratings, and I'm not going to get into the details of the data, but let's just know that our ratings in year one were very different in the compost only versus the fertilized treatment. But in year two, everything came back. And there were differences in terms of foliage ratings. There were no difference between any of the treatments. When we look at plant height, we went from differences across all species tested in year one versus only differences in one species in year two. The compost plants, we went from a rating of a 3 or a 4 to a 6 or 7s. We went from a height of 124 to 344 centimeters. It's a huge difference in plant size, and huge differences that we see the more that compost and that mulch decomposes and those beds are allowed to mature. This is the big message that we see across all of our treatments in the EarthKind program. This is what leads us to the conclusions. And again, these are conclusions that are drawn from data that we've collected in the field. That we know that the more, excuse me, the more that we incorporate organic matter, the more organic matter that we add. And the longer it's allowed to sit, the more mature those beds become, the healthier they become. Now, does it work if we only put mulch on? Absolutely. In certain situations, if we need a kickstart, we're going to add and incorporate 2 to 3 inches of compost at the beginning. This gets those beds kick-started, allows those microorganisms that are there part of the composting process to get involved early, and that initiates some of the breakdown, because what we're doing is we're trying to get the mulch to start breaking down. We want those soil bacteria to break down that organic matter, start getting that into the soil, and start changing what's going on in that soil, changing those soil properties, and doing everything that we can to make that soil as healthy as we possibly can for the plants. And again, this is what we see in shrubs such as roses. We see it in crepe myrtles. There's a small shrub trial where we're seeing similar results. There's perennials, we've got it proven in, and now we have evidence to provide good recommendations for how to manage annuals in your landscape. And so this is something I think we're very proud of in the EarthKind program, and we hope that you'll enjoy and make it part of your landscape management style as well. Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce Mr. Todd Williams. Todd is the County Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources in Rockwall County. Of course, he works for the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service as I do. He's a great friend and EarthKind teammate. He's one of the smartest, finest gentlemen I've ever met. He's one of the most outstanding extension educators I've ever met. He is the best of the best, and I'm truly honored to have him as my friend. He's a key member of our EarthKind environmental soils research team for several years, and he was the local site coordinator for our EarthKind soil management study and with the annual flowers there at the new courthouse in Rockwall, which is a beautiful structure. He and his master gardeners have put in many, many long hours and physically demanding tasks for 3 years to make this very complex study a reality. I saw him at 10 o'clock at night holding a flashlight in his teeth, taking data on these plants. Now, when you look up dedication to dictionary, they're going to have his picture right there. I've asked Mr. Williams to share his experience with how well our EarthKind environmental soil management approach works in the real world. You've heard about the research, now you're going to hear about it in the real world, and also his experience with shredded hardwood mulch. So, Mr. Williams, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Dr. George. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today with you. this is a really exciting opportunity because of the EarthKind practices. And you know that, and I know that, but I wanted to share with your audience today. And so as Dr. George talked about, what he wants me to talk about is some of the soil composition that we went through as we learned in this particular experience. And so I want to put a shout out to my Master Gardeners and say thank you guys for all your hard work as well, because none of this would have been able to be accomplished without you. And so what we started with was basically a blank slate. Now, Dr. George talked about two different locations, but I'm going to start with actually the location at the courthouse that you made mention of first, where we did our dwarf roses and our annuals. And so what had happened was that as the new courthouse was put into place, there was an area that was left basically vacant for wildflowers. But the challenge is with wildflowers, people either like them or they think they look like weeds. And in this case, they thought they looked like weeds. And so they needed something to happen. And so we went before the Commissioner's Court and we asked them if the Master Gardeners could use that for research purposes. And with your guidance, we were able to do that. And so what we did initially is we tilled the ground and then we put in 3 inches of compost, just regular compost. And we tilled that in the soil. And then we did that, and then we made our beds. And so we had some turf in there, but we also had areas for our dwarf roses. Then we also came back and we also had other areas for our annuals that we were going to research. Now, I will tell you, if you ever want to know anything about annuals, understand it is very laborious when you do research. And so I believe both Dr. George and I have committed to never do that again. So
That's very true.
But once we got our soil developed and in place with that compost, and it was good and mixed, then we came back and we put our dwarf roses in, and we just basically put them in, and it was in January when we actually put them in. And then we put 3 inches of just basically hardwood mulch on top of that. And it's just native hardwood mulch. It doesn't have to be anything in particularly special. But what we noticed from that is that those roses didn't really sleep. They really didn't even creep like you usually hear with woody ornamentals as you put them in. The first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. Well, they just went ahead and they just leapt. And so to watch that grow and to see how they responded to that particular method that we used with the EarthKind method, it was pretty amazing to watch. Now, in this picture behind that you see, these are some of the roses that we had out at our Discovery Garden, which is an educational garden that the Master Gardeners have. And these roses too were used with that particular soil preparation method. We brought in some manure, we brought in some compost, we mixed it into the soil, and in this particular one, we let it sit probably for about a month. Then we would turn it, we let it sit again, and then we turned it again, and then we planted them. And these were basically 1-gallon containers that we planted them in. And as you can see behind us, they responded very well. Now this is a little over a year, so it's not automatic, but again, showing the fact that it just leapt because of the composition and nutrients in the soil that we had provided through the EarthKind experience. Now it's very important though, as you're looking at the EarthKind method too, that you have to have the mulch on top. That is key. And so basically what I like to use is just a basic hardwood mulch. And you can see it right here, native hardwood mulch. It's coarse, it's not real fine. And so what happens with this is it allows it as the moisture hits it to go through, but also it allows the soil to stay in place because of the mulch that is added. And with that then, it also provides some other great factors in it. Because of its coarseness and because of the depth of the 3 inches, it's going to knock out the sunlight, and so we're going to have reduced weed production. In fact, almost to no weed production if you keep it at those 3 inches. And so we like that. And then with that, it reduces, as it breaks down every year, it breaks down about 1 inch from the bottom to add more compost to the soil. And so I don't have to go back in and I don't have to add more fertilizer in because the compost is doing that for me.
And in your dwarf rose trial and your discovery garden, you did never have to add any fertilizer.
I do not add fertilizer. No. I just add more mulch.
And the mulch needs to be in cubes or shredded?
I prefer shredded because it's more natural, and so I actually like the way it looks as well in the beds, but because it is shredded, it'll hold in place better.
Now I agree. My experience with any wood that's cubed, anytime there's a rain, boom, it will float. But once this has been moistened 2 or 3 times, it's really good at resisting floating away.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the EarthKind method and the soil implementation.
You bet. It's great to work with you and your master gardeners. Y'all are wonderful.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Now I have some wonderful slides to share with you. These pictures were taken by Todd Williams, Gay Hammond, and Dr. Greg Church. The essence of EarthKind is a research-based, cutting-edge approach to environmental landscape management. Here, Dr. Harp is using a SPAD meter to measure the leaf greenness as an indication of plant stress and nutrient deficiency. This is in our EarthKind soil management research at Rockwall, and this device is able to detect a plant that's having trouble much quicker than it would ever be apparent to the human eye. He's also using time domain reflectometry to quantify soil moisture content. Both of these scientific devices make our research more objective and more precise, and both of those are very important. Here we are at the EarthKind Soil Management Study. That's a Rockwall Courthouse in the background. 2 great Rockwall County Master Gardeners are taking data, and they did a marvelous job of that. We devoted a great deal of work doing this research, very labor intensive. To show you how well EarthKind soil management works, these are roses in our national EarthKind rose research. And these roses did not even receive compost, just year-round mulch. They've never been fertilized, never been sprayed. Look how gorgeous they are. And you can have roses just as good as long as rose rosette is not a problem. You can have roses just this nice. Don't have to spray them, don't have to fertilize them if you follow our approach. Here's Mr. Williams' dwarf EarthKind rose field trial at the courthouse there. All those are different cultivars of roses. They got 3 inches of compost one time and just mulch after that, so no fertilizer, no pesticides. Look how beautiful they are. Wouldn't you love to have roses that nice? Boy, I certainly would. And here we are at Myers Park in McKinney. Dr. Greg Church's great EarthKind work there. This is an EarthKind trial on annuals. Look how well they're doing. All those different kinds. Compost one time, then just mulch, no fertilizer. Look at how healthy those perennials are in his perennial trial. That gorgeous one in the back with the electric blue flowers. I think that's Henry Duelberg salvia. That's just one plant, never been fertilized. Todd Williams and his master gardeners have done a superb job in their EarthKind demonstration in Rockwall. In their discovery garden, I'm very impressed with what they've done there. Here's where they're preparing the beds and adding the compost. Here the roses on the left is their first year. That's just compost one time, no fertilizer, no pesticides. On the right is just a year later. Look how much they've grown with no fertilizer. That's just amazing. Here they are mature. You can have plants just that nice with no fertilizer and no pesticides. Thank you for joining us today. I hope that we have shared with you the strong scientific foundation we've created to support our recommendations regarding EarthKind soil management. This data-driven environmental approach, which was reported on very favorably in a recent article in the New York Times, means more enjoyment and less work for you. It protects air and water quality, and it plays a major role in helping you to achieve beautiful, productive plants of which you will be very proud. I want to express my sincere appreciation to Dr. John Sloan, Dr. Daryl Harp, Mr. Todd Williams, and the EarthKind team from the Rockwall County Master Gardeners. all of whom worked so hard to make these research studies, the field trial, and the discovery garden such a success. I also want to thank my lovely wife and wonderful son for their outstanding work in the filming and editing of this video. Please join us on Friday, April 16th for our video entitled Correcting Common Problems in Landscape Design. I think you will really enjoy it.